Hi, I'm Jan from Newton Custom Interiors, and today I'm going to show you how to make an ottoman. I wanted to make an ottoman out of this floral fabric, and I had a hard time at first figuring out how to do it. But I finally got it made, and I've done a step-by-step video tutorial showing you exactly how I did it.
Here are the materials and supplies that you'll need for your ottoman. Here are the finished dimensions of my ottoman. You'll need to cut your boards according to the sizes that you need. Paint or stain the 4 legs for the ottoman. To make your box, drill and screw the 4 boards together at the corners using the 1.5-inch screws. Use 3 screws for each of the corners. Put one of the 4x4 cut boards in each corner of the box. Using the 3-inch screws, attach the 4x4 boards by screwing them into each corner. 3 screws on one side and 3 on the other. Place the center support in the box, making sure that it's centered. Screw the center support to the box in 3 places on each end. Place the foam and plywood on top of the batting. The batting needs to be cut big enough to staple on top of the board. Staple the batting to the top of the plywood, stapling once in the center of each side and then from the center out to each corner on each side. Where the batting meets in the corners, staple at an angle on each side of the batting, and then with your scissors, cut off the excess batting. Also cut off the excess batting on each of the sides. I like to pre-line my upholstered pieces with flannel before stapling on the fabric. You need to cut the inner lining big enough to be stapled to the top of the plywood. This is an optional step. Staple the inner lining to the plywood the same way as the batting. Starting in the center of each side, you want to make sure that you're pulling the inner lining tight. Staple from the center out to each corner on each of the sides. You want to make sure when you're stapling that your staples are right next to each other. Stop stapling about 2 inches from each of the corners. Take the excess fabric at the corner and pull back tightly. Put a staple right in the center of the corner. And then with your fingers, gather up the fabric on each side of that staple. And then staple down the gathers. Cut off the excess flannel inner lining. The flannel inner lining helps round the corners of the foam and makes it easier to staple on the fabric. Lay the fabric wrong side up and lay the top of the ottoman on top of it. Cut the fabric big enough to be stapled to the top of the plywood. Staple the fabric to the top of the plywood in the center of each side. Then staple each side, stopping about 2 inches from each corner. At each of the corners, pull the fabric straight back and staple in the center of the corner. Then make a pleat, or a small pleat and then a large pleat, on each side of that staple. Once you've made the pleat, then you can staple it down. Then cut off the fabric close to the staples. This is an optional step, but if you want, you can add cording to your ottoman. I'll link below to my How to Make Cording video. Simply place the cording along the edge of the plywood and staple it down. When you get to each of the corners, you can make a V cut out of the fabric in the seam allowance of the cording, and that will help the cording go around the corner better. Once you're done cutting the V, then simply staple the cording in place. To join the cording together, clip the right side of the cording so that it meets the left side evenly. Wrap the excess fabric around the left side of the cording so that it covers up the end, and then staple it in place. The cording adds a nice finished edge to the ottoman, but again, it's optional. Cut enough batting to go all the way around the box. Starting at one corner, place the batting even with the corner and even with the bottom of the box. Staple the batting in place on all four sides, and then cut off the excess batting at the last corner. Cut off the excess batting along the top edge too. Cover the batting with flannel inner lining, stapling along the top and bottom edges. Make a loop of fabric that is long enough to go around the outside of the box. You'll have two seams that are on opposite corners from each other. The fabric needs to be wide enough to be stapled along the top and the bottom edges. Staple the fabric to the edges of the box on all four sides and also on the top and bottom edges. Trim away the excess fabric and apply a GIMP trim to cover the raw edges of the fabric. This is an optional step. Place the plywood foam part of the ottoman on the table with the plywood side up. Then place the box part of the ottoman on top of it with the center support board next to the plywood. Screw the center support board to the plywood, making sure to screw the boards together in several places. Screw the leg plates to each of the 4x4 corners. Screw on each of the 4 legs to each of the plates on every corner. Here's what the finished underside of the ottoman will look like. And here's the finished ottoman.